Hey y'all, Casey here. I know I use a lot of terms when I talk about queer and trans stuff, some of which are more widely understood and others are not so much. Even the terms that are more widely understood sometimes have different understandings or definitions depending on who you're talking to. I don't know about you, but I know I don't like it when language muddles up communication. The whole purpose of language is to be able to communicate effectively. And if you and the person you're talking to don't have the same understanding of what those words mean, then you're not going to be able to communicate very effectively. In an attempt to break down any miscommunication, I'm making this video to define terms I commonly use. People don't have to agree with me on these definitions, but at least now you'll know exactly what I mean when I say these words. These definitions happen to be what I think are the correct definitions, but that's just my opinion, man. Jokes aside, I did actually write my capstone, which is somewhat akin to a dissertation in law school, on the meaning of a bunch of the words that I'm defining in this video. If anyone is interested in reading that, I caution you, it is some pretty dry legal writing, but if you want it, I'm happy to share it. Just let me know down in the comments. First up is the term sexual orientation. Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary defines sexual orientation as a person's sexual identity or self-identification as bisexual, homosexual, straight, etc. The state of being bisexual, pansexual, gay, straight, etc. I would phrase it a little more simply by saying that sexual orientation is the types of people or types of gender identities that you are attracted to. Interestingly, sexual orientation is not in Webster's current primary print version of their dictionary. The closest thing in there is sexuality, which, as relevant here, is defined as the expression of the sex instinct. Sexual activity. The next term is queer. Queer is a difficult one because it definitely has multiple meanings and can change depending on the context and the people you're talking to. One popular meaning of the word queer is to mean a catch-all for all non-straight sexual orientations. This could include bisexual, gay, lesbian, and others. Webster's third has a ton of different definitions for the word queer, but relevant here is differing in some odd way from what is usual or normal, sexually deviant, and one who is queer, especially a male homosexual. It can also be used as shorthand for a more complicated or nuanced sexual orientation. Queer is the term that I most commonly use to describe my own sexual orientation because I am specifically attracted to masculine men and feminine women. For that reason, queer resonates more with me than, say, bisexual because I am less attracted to feminine men and masculine women. So I don't feel that it's completely honest to say that I am bisexual. However, depending on who I'm talking to, I do sometimes use the descriptor bisexual to describe my own sexual orientation. It's just that, for me, queer makes a little bit more sense. I also use the word queer to describe the entire community of people who aren't straight. I'm not a big fan of the alphabet soup of LGBTQIA blah blah blah, so I prefer to use the term the queer and trans community. To me, I feel like that encapsulates all of the alphabet soup while being a lot easier to say, and ends up being a lot clearer. There's no question as to what do all these letters mean. The word gay is another word that can have multiple uses and its meaning can change slightly depending on context. The classic meaning for the word gay is a man who is attracted to another man. It can also be used as an umbrella term to talk about all people who are not straight. similar to the word queer. This latter usage, this umbrella usage, is the closest thing to the definition that we find in Webster's Third, which just says homosexual. It is true that both queer and gay have other meanings in the English language besides the way that they're used to describe not straight people. Queer primarily meaning strange and gay meaning happy. Webster's Third includes a whole bunch of other much more obscure definitions for both of these words, but none of those are really what's generally meant when either of those words are used, and certainly that none of those other definitions are what I mean when I use these words. The other side of the not straight binary is the term lesbian. Lesbian means a woman who is attracted to another woman. Webster's comes pretty close to that with their definition, which says that lesbian means of or relating to homosexual relations between women. Lesbian does not have the same umbrella term usage as the word gay does. One nuance when it comes to the term lesbian, however, is that it can sometimes be used to be a descriptor for any woman who is attracted to another woman, whether that person is only attracted to women, or if they are bisexual or pansexual, or etc. Gay and lesbian are generally speaking unisexual descriptors. In other words, gay and lesbian describe a single-sex attraction. Unisexual is not a commonly used term, however, I am using it here to juxtapose those terms against the next term that I'm going to discuss, which is bisexual. Bisexual literally means two sexes. However, in common usage, bisexual means being attracted to both men and women. Webster's has both definitions. The terms I've described so far focus on how one relates sexually to others. They are, for the most part, outward-looking descriptors. The other half of the QT community, generally speaking, has to do with inward-looking descriptors. One such descriptor is transgender. Transgender means someone whose gender identity does not align with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Gender identity is one's internal sense of being a man, a woman, or neither. So, for example, if you were assigned a male sex at birth, but your gender identity is woman, then you are a transgender woman. Gender identity tends to be a harder term for cisgender people to grasp. Cisgender people, by the way, are people whose gender identity aligns with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Part of why I think that gender identity can sometimes be harder for cisgender people to grasp is because they're not generally aware of their gender identity. This is not because cisgender people aren't smart or aren't woke, but rather because gender identity is kind of like your liver. If nothing is wrong with your liver, then you generally don't feel it. If something is wrong with your liver, though, you tend to be in a great deal of pain and acutely aware of it. The outward manifestation of one's gender identity is gender expression. Gender expression is how you communicate to the world what your gender identity is. Gender expression is generally made up of things like how you dress, how you look, how you act, etc. For example, if you want the world to understand that you are a woman, then you can dress femininely and wear makeup. You do not have to do these things to be a woman. However, it is much easier for people to tell what your gender identity is if your gender expression matches your gender identity. I should also note that gender expression differs substantially depending on what cultural context people find themselves in. What is classically feminine or classically masculine in one culture is not always the same in a different culture. As mentioned earlier, people are assigned a sex at birth. Sex is based on primary and secondary sex characteristics. In this context, sex is used to denote someone as male, female, or intersex. Male and female are sex descriptors, while man and woman are gender identity descriptors. Intersex is a descriptor for someone who is born with a mix of primary sex characteristics. Primary sex characteristics include internal and external genitalia, such as penis, scrotum, vulva, vagina, uterus, fallopian tubes, and others. Secondary sex characteristics include breasts, pigmented facial and chest hair, hip shape, whether rounded or unrounded, upper body musculature, and Adam's apples. Some people include more or fewer characteristics on that list of secondary sex characteristics. However, what I've included is what is generally agreed upon. Some people might be surprised to learn that the presence of estrogen or testosterone are not, by themselves, indicators of one's sex, because, in fact, everyone has both estrogen and testosterone. The difference is that females tend to have more estrogen, while males tend to have more testosterone. Another term that is not commonly included in definitions of primary and secondary sex characteristics, to the surprise of many people, is the term chromosome. This is not to say that chromosomes are unrelated to a person's sex, however. Chromosomes are what trigger the initial manifestation of primary and secondary sexual characteristics. Okay, now let's get into the messy stuff. What sex are transgender people? There are plenty of trans activists who will vehemently scream that either sex isn't real or sex is equal to gender identity. In other words, trans women are absolutely females and trans men are absolutely males, and if you disagree, then you're a transphobe. Then, on the other side, you have people that say you can absolutely never change your sex, transgender women are men, and transgender men are women. This confusion of gender identity descriptors and sex descriptors doesn't actually answer the question. This is a question that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and researching, and after all of that, all I know is that I don't know for sure. I know that by taking hormones, you can change some of your secondary sex characteristics. I know that you can change some of your primary sex characteristics with surgery. I know that you can not change your sex chromosomes, and there are some sex characteristics that you cannot change. So, where does that leave us? Maybe you can't change your sex. Maybe you can change your sex in part or entirely. The medical name for what is frequently called bottom surgery is in fact SRS, which stands for Sexual Reassignment Surgery. Maybe trans people are a third sex, or maybe we are a subset of male and female. At the end of the day, I don't really care whether people see me as male or female, as long as I am treated with kindness and respect and not put in situations that are obviously dangerous given who I am. Throughout all of this defining, you may have noticed that I have not defined the term gender. This is, in part, because I do not believe that the word gender is an effective term. I believe that its use tends to muddle the waters and make communication less effective. And like I've said, I believe that the point of communication is to express yourself as clearly as possible. When people use the word gender, they frequently mean either gender identity, gender expression, or both. Like how the word Coke in some parts of the South is used to mean soft drinks generally and not specifically Coca-Cola. This resulting lack of clarity is what I find to be the root of many arguments about sex, gender identity, and the like. Those arguments usually go something like this. Gender, meaning gender expression, is a construct. No, it's not, meaning gender identity. And yelling ensues. All that yelling can be avoided if we just use clearer terms. Before wrapping up, I would like to make a note on dictionaries. People who are not word nerds tend to think of words as being in the dictionary. They tend to think that each word has one official dictionary definition. If this were the case, my job would be a whole heck of a lot easier. In fact, words can have many meanings, including some that are not found in any of the dictionaries. That's right, dictionaries, plural. There are an incredible number of English language dictionaries, and they're not just the same words and definitions published in different sizes by different publishers. Each dictionary has its own philosophy behind it. Surprised? I know I was when I first learned that in law school. The two main camps of dictionaries are prescriptive and descriptive dictionaries. The main dictionary that most people think of is some version of Webster's dictionary, which is a descriptive dictionary. Descriptive dictionaries describe how words are actually used, taking a more fluid view of language. Definitions in them can change depending on how words are actually used and evolve over time. The leading prescriptive dictionary is the Oxford English Dictionary. Prescriptive dictionaries prescribe how words should be used. They tend to take a much more static view of language and are much slower to change. Personally, I don't think of language as static. I think of it as a living, changing thing, which is why I strongly favor descriptive dictionaries. One famous lawyer who favored prescriptive dictionaries is Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Much to Scalia's displeasure and my glee, the favored dictionary in legal matters is Webster's Third International Unabridged Dictionary, a descriptive dictionary. It's this behemoth right here. Even this gigantic book does not have every word in it. For example, some words not found in this book are transgender, gender expression, and gender identity. Even descriptive dictionaries can lag behind commonly used words in the English language. The ever-changing nature of the English language was part of the impetus for the Merriam-Webster company to create the online dictionary, which is separate from their printed, which is separate from this version of the dictionary. It has a lot more up-to-date definitions and has much more current definitions that encapsulate the way we actually use words. It is not my intention to be the word police. Words can mean different things to different people. At the end of the day, words are just sounds that we have ascribed meanings to. They do not, on their own, have any sort of universal inherent definitions. As a lawyer, I kind of have to be a word nerd. In my line of work, the exact definition of a word can really, really matter. However, I understand that most people don't function that way. For that reason, I like to meet people where they're at. I like to use language that they're familiar with, rather than talk down to them with obscure, hyper-specific terms and correct them when they don't use a word exactly how I use it. The definitions I have stated here, however, are the definitions that I believe to be correct. And they're exactly what I mean when I use them in my videos and in my normal life. Feel free to adopt these definitions, or, don't. You don't have to agree with me, but at least now you can understand what I'm saying. You'll know exactly what I mean when I say these words. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you got something out of this video, please click those like and subscribe buttons. Until next time.